And welcome to the High Octane podcast. This is a Friday Night Fuel production. My name is Zach, and over here I got my partner Ricky. He's gonna try really hard to pay attention tonight, guys. Say hello to the internet, Ricky.
Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to episode 6, Nashville Hot. And Zach, we're gonna recap a lot of stuff this weekend or this week going into tomorrow. Um, but yeah, Zach said it kind of got my eyes on the TV and I got my eyes on you, Zach. I'm gonna try to pay attention for the viewers that are watching. There might be a small basketball game that's on right now involving that school right there. So anybody who knows, I love basketball. I just the March Madness and all that stuff leading up to the tournament is I'm a big fan of that. And yeah, looks like Tech's down 25-19 going to the under 8 timeout. And enough about basketball. We're going to talk about racing and what's going on here in Friday Night Fuel.
Yeah, it's time to get the show on the road, and whether you're ready or not, we're going to get started here. So we do have quite the show packed for you tonight. As you can see up above me in the rundown, you can see we're going to recap Martinsville, a week that was for Friday Night Fuel, as folks were able to see over on Snake Bitten Gaming. That was chaotic for a while, but it did have its moments where drivers were able to compete out there on the paperclip. We're going to talk to you from driver's perspective how that race went down. Talk to you about points updates this week. There's certainly a lot to go over, especially with the new winner happening last week. Shakes up a playoff push where drivers only have 2 weeks to lock in their spots for the Friday Night Fuel playoff push. Then we're going to take a pit stop for a little while. We're going to talk NASCAR silly season here with you. There's certainly a lot going on this week in the NASCAR world. We're going to weigh in and give our opinions. Maybe you guys will get to know us a little bit better of who we enjoy out there on the racetrack. But certainly some news to be found during our pit stop. And then Nashville's Superspeedway is on the docket for Friday Night Fuel tomorrow night on Snake Bitten Gaming. We'd love to see you there. And ultimately, our hope is that we can preview that race for you well, maybe make some good predictions, and talk about what it's going to take to tame Nashville Superspeedway. Let's take a look in the rear view for a brief little while and talk about the week that was over at Martinsville. We were able to get a new winner in what was a crazy race. This race was 300 laps around the famous paperclip. It took a while to get this one done, but this race involved 14 cautions and had 86 caution laps for this one. But honestly, I can truthfully say I've seen worse at the paperclip, and these drivers were able to get some good solid green flag runs in. Of course, with the chaos, you made a lot of different fuel strategies and tire strategies for the night, and a new race winner for us here. John Garrett takes home the victory for Friday Night Fuel. If you guys know that name, John's been on the ARCA Menards circuit a time or two. Maybe you've seen him on TV. Well, he night lights during Friday Night Fuel as an iRacer and was able to sort of be at the right place and the right time and get the win. We'll talk about being at the right place and the right time, I'm sure, in our recap. Top 5, you have John Garrett, and then Nate Estep, John Gutekunst, Gary Donaldson, who we'll talk about in a little bit in the rookie update, and then me here in the top 5. So that was a pretty cool in order to put my name up there. But let's talk about it, Ricky. 14 yellows for 85 laps. These drivers had to dodge and weave and just be at the right place at the right time towards the end of this one.
Yeah, for sure. And I felt like that race wasn't as chaotic as I thought it was going to be. You kind of touched on it a little bit, Zach. We did have green flag pit stops during that event. We actually had 2 cycles of green flag pit stops, one in the first half of the race and then one towards the later half of the second half of the race. And I thought strategy was definitely going to be a key. We were proud because we got stage points finally in a tough season for us where that's kind of been not our mojo. We kind of come strong late on in the second half of the races. But, kudos to John Garrett. We thought tires were going to play a role right after maybe 20, 25 laps. We were able, me and Mark took tires one time, and we drove past John and Nate Estep. And maybe after that 2025 mark, we thought we started to gap them a little bit more than usual. And we came down and kind of did a call where we thought tires were going to be a key. So that put us kind of mid pack where the Hornets were. And we just could never regain that track position. And I thought we were going to be able to drive up there, drive kind of, aggressively methodically, I guess you could say. We were able to outbrake people going into the corners, but it was just tough trying to get back to the field. And once John took control of the race, he pretty much just let it. He just led the rest of the way there. So kudos to him and locks himself in. And now that just tightens that little points battle, right, that we were going to talk about later on in the show. And that's another spot that's gone, right? Bryce wasn't there, so he couldn't add to his win totals. And so with Garrett winning, that shrinks that field margin just a little bit more. And yeah, we're going to come this week and see if somebody else can clinch themselves in. And in 2 weeks, I'm really excited to talk about what we're going to do for Darlington. Not only with we're doing a throwback scheme, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself right now, but there's going to be a lot of cool retro paint schemes, and hopefully, Zach, you'll be able to see some of them. We can put them here on the podcast to kind of emphasize what we're doing. Me and my brother are doing something that's pretty cool, and I blame you, Wes, for making that announcement because I wanted to do it on this platform. But yeah, this is exciting 2 weeks for us, Nashville and Darlington, and then boom, we're right into it, and we're off race for a championship.
Yeah, pretty cool opportunity for a lot of drivers to showcase their throwback knowledge next week, or 2 weeks from now at Darlington. And we won't get too far ahead of ourselves there. Maybe our pit stop will be a paint preview of that race for you guys. We'll see what we can do. But I see Spence out here. Welcome to the show, Spencer. And for anybody out there in YouTube land that has the ability to chat back and forth, quick disclaimer, I'm doing something a little bit different for Ricky's audio tonight in terms of how I capture it and how it's thrown back to you on YouTube. If it's too soft or, if it's lacking, let me know, and I can change that here on the fly. But we're just trying to make sound quality better and tweak things as we go along. As you can see, our pictures are different, and we're just trying to make this the best it can be. So feedback from you guys is always important. As for my race recap, Ricky, I was you probably heard me buzzing back there because I was one of the Hornets, and it was Martinsville's not my favorite place to be, mainly because I just can't seem to get out of the way fast enough, and managed to have a decent car, probably like a fringe top 10 ride all night long. And your night was a lot different than mine. You were up front, you had track position, you were able to be up there with the really fast guys, and I just kind of felt like my advantage during the race was to just stay out of trouble and try to be as clean as I could be, and make sure that I rolled the center of the corner well. I can't really outbrake anybody, but I know that if I'm patient on throttle, I can make up some ground through the center of the corner, and that's where a lot of my strength was throughout the night. And ultimately, the goal was to just stay on the lead lap till things fell apart, and that's exactly what happened, and was able to be there in the mix towards the end. So no matter which way you slice it, there's a bunch of different ways to go about Martinsville. Many drivers had the opportunity to have a good night, and I personally was fortunate enough to get fifth out of the action. But as you mentioned, Ricky, John Garrett gets the win, which shakes up our playoff picture, and we're going to show that to you right now here on the playoff points here for Friday Night Fuel. As you can see, things shake up a little bit at the top with Bryce taking the week off and John Gutekunst now reclaiming his points lead over the field. But if you can take a look down a little bit further, you're going to see John Garrett down the charts just a smidge, but it doesn't matter because he has a win and he's locked himself into Friday Night Fuel's playoff run.
Yeah, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different winners. So we have 5 spots that are open, and Mark Parkhurst, Ryan Moutre, Wade Burris, Gary Donaldson had a great run. You mentioned that as he was the top 5. I think he finished 4th at Martinsville, so that helps him. He's been kind of consistent, right? Mid 30s, high 20s, right? And then he pops off a 43 right there. So that kind of helps him out. Thought Wade was going to be a little bit better than he was a week ago. 26 points that kind of hurts him, right? Maybe that's the podcast jinx, right? He was consistent and getting better each week, and then he had the dip off here at Martinsville. Greg Wood Senior's he's still in it, even though he's probably almost a race out. Christopher Pendel, Jim Oot, Spencer Till. I hate to say it, their playoff chances, unless they win, their playoff chances are pretty much wrapped up. Their fate is sealed. And then, looking back at the top 5, right, it's either 1776, ALR, or TTR. Those are your drivers that basically make up the top 11 spots in the point standings. So we said in episode 1, those teams are going to be the ones that I'd keep my eyes on, and sure enough, they're there, right? ALR, 1776, and TTR, Titletown Racing, we're all there. So I think if we can still consistently show up week in and week out, I still think stage points are going to be a pivotal thing, especially going to a place like Nashville. And so anxious to see kind of where we all shake up. I know I said ALR. I'm going to throw in JST in there as well. Kirby Caputa's sitting there tied for 6th. He kind of shaking some things up with his sophomore season. And if I'm Kirby, what's a sophomore slump? Coming in and being the top half, locking myself into the playoffs point-wise, not winning, but points, getting in on points, that's a huge accomplishment for that team and that driver in particular.
Yeah, pretty cool stories all to be found. Some more stories to be refreshed on as we bring Einstein into the picture to remind us who these rookies are. You talked about it, Ricky. The points battle between some of these guys for the Rookie of the Year is getting pretty intense. You look on down the chart, you have Wade Burris and Gary Donaldson side by side with one another trying to figure things out. And then not too far behind, you got guys like Chris Pendel, you have Oot back there as well. So these guys are all fighting for Rookie of the Year honors right around the bubble too. So maybe making the playoffs is what sort of catapults you into a Rookie of the Year conversation.
Right, and man, if I'm Wade, you got to have a good finish this week. Last week kind of just hurt you. Gary did a phenomenal job of making himself known that, hey, I'm here to play too, guys, and I want to make a name for myself as well. And heard rumors, I don't know if it's true or not, he's more of a road course ace. And so a place like Martinsville being able to outbreak somebody getting into the corner, I mean, that played to his key. I felt like he had a good short run car, but then as the run kind of went on, he kind of just it didn't fall off completely, but he did fall off compared to what us fast guys at the front were doing. And I'm not saying I'm bad fast or anything. I'm just saying what I saw on last Friday night. So Wade, you gotta get a better finish than 26 points per race, in my opinion, if you want to come on top and lock yourself in to being that Rookie of the Year. And then if I'm Gary, I'm riding the momentum that I had from the finish of last week, trying to go into Nashville and try to accomplish the same thing. So I know Gary, he's a patient driver. He kind of just lets the race play out and kind of just lets it come to him as it goes on throughout the event. And I think if he still has that mindset and doesn't rush things and doesn't put himself in a bad situation, I believe that he can improve on that 43-point showing that we saw last week.
I see Wade here now in the chat, definitely looking forward for a much better finish this week. You should take our helpful hint from last week, buddy. We talked about the importance of stage points as well. Those could be the reason why you're in or out of the playoffs. Ricky, talk about how important being in the top 10 at halfway is here in Friday Night Fuel.
Yeah, so we say this all the time on this show. We only have one stage break, so that's your one opportunity to get stage points. And so if I'm looking at Wade, 7 stage points, we gotta see that number climb. If it's not just if you're not in the top 5, just trying to scrap and chip and claw to get something out of the evening, right? You don't want to walk away with a goose egg in that column. I'm in the same boat. I'm at 20 compared to look at the guys at the top 57, 55. You got Mark at 53, Mark Gonzalez. I know we have 2 Marks. Mark Gonzalez at 53, Nathan Eastup at 31, and then everybody else is kind of just, trickling. Chafin 37, right? So those guys are putting themselves in great situations to capitalize on something like that. And I know that's what makes our league so so special is having that one stage break. So now it emphasizes us to get more out of what we can get at the halfway break. But yeah, if I'm Wade, I mean, seven's not going to cut it. Gary, you're at 16, right? That's not going to cut it either. So I know he's outpointing Wade when it comes to the stage point stuff, but yeah, that should be the main focus this week if I'm Wade. Trying to get some laps in, trying to understand what the car is doing in clean air, and then maybe throw up an AI race. See what the car does in dirty air, and kind of set that parameters of what your skill level is. And Zach, I know me and you are doing something kind of different, and we won't get into that since that's not a part of this show, but maybe you set that skill level with the AI and you just try to make laps. What's the car doing in dirty air? Is it pushing? Is it loose on entry? Like what you need to figure that stuff out pretty quickly. And I know Wade, we raced last night, and me and him were messaging back and forth after the race, and you know, he was just trying to get behind somebody who is quick and trying to learn off of them. But at the same time, if you get behind them, you're going to know the car is going to be in dirty air the whole time, and it's not going to react the same as when somebody else is in front of you, right? So I know Wade, he's learning. He's doing a really good job, and I feel like tomorrow night he'll have a good showing, and hopefully he'll come out on top and better that 7-point stage point thing that we see on the graphic.
Yeah, absolutely. A great Rookie of the Year battle compounded with the race to the chase. As the points go away now, we are getting ready to talk about moving away from Martinsville and setting our sights forward for Nashville Superspeedway. But in the meantime, I think we need to take some time and take a pit stop here. This is the part of the show where we sort of deviate from Friday Night Fuel, and we wound up talking mostly just motorsports stuff in general for you. In the last few weeks, we've had some really great NASCAR news and NASCAR content to talk to you about. Of course, we're in a next-gen NASCAR series, so well, why not talk about the real-life version of what we are doing on the iRacing platform. We're going to talk to you about silly season. This is the time of the year where we see a lot of drivers now confirm their already established moves from one race team to another. There's guys like Chase Briscoe, who we've known is going to be the new driver of the 19 car for quite some time. We think of Michael McDowell moving over to Spire. Those kinds of moves we've known for a while. But there's still a few more dominoes left to fall, and there have been a few announcements when it comes to these new faces coming into new places. The least kept secret in the NASCAR garage is RFK, Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing, expanding to a 3-car team. The question was, how are they going to do it with the recent charter things going on in the sport with the lawsuit and whatnot? It sort of put a freeze on the transferring of charters. It's kind of put Roush and other teams who wish to expand in a weird spot, trying to figure out their future together. Well, they found it. They were able to lease a Rick Ware Racing charter, and now the 60 is in NASCAR Cup Series full-time competition with Ryan Preece at the helm. One of the bigger additions to this silly season is the fact that RFK now gets the sponsoring backing of Kroger. And Kroger, of course, if you know a Kroger car, you know they got some wild paint schemes because they're advertising like 35 brands on a car at the same time, and they're very unique in how they're comprised. But this is a big deal for Roush, who, yes, they've started to get some normal sponsorship in. You think of King's Hawaiian Rolls, you think of those buildsubmarine.com cars. Those are starting to become the new Valvoline, DeWalt, Exide of Roush, and now they're bringing in a new stable, a full-time partnership. I think this is really cool in order to bring the 60, which as a Mark Martin fan, I just love to see it, and to bring in a sponsor like Kroger into Roush. I think this could be a big game changer for them. The question, Ricky, is the driver, Ryan Preece, taking the helm of the 60 car.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked when I heard the news that Preece was going to take over the 60. I thought there was a couple guys possibly in the Xfinity series that could possibly take that ride. I thought Riley Herbst might have been a contender for that. I know he was looking to get a Cup ride, and especially with him being in a Ford already in Xfinity, Now you lose that driver to Toyota and going to 2311, and yeah, that kind of shocked me. I didn't think he had the best season at Stewart-Haas. Now I know the team shut down and Cole Custer's taken over as the driver of the 41 at Haas factory. They're renaming with Tony Stewart backing out of that. So that actually did surprise me a little bit. Now he's in good equipment, right? He has Roush Yates horsepower underneath the hood, even though everybody basically has the same engine, right? I know there's some things you could probably do to get by a little bit, right? So that did shock me. And then yeah, Herbst, another surprise for me going to Toyota. So leaving Ford to go to Toyota, right? When there's not a lot of seats at Toyota to begin with, right? We saw Chase Briscoe take over for Martin Truex Jr., who retired at the end of the season, driving the 19. Another Stewart-Haas driver who jumped ship from Ford over to Toyota, right? So that kind of surprised me as well. And then seeing Daniel Hemrick take over the 19, going from Cup, I think he was Cup part-time or full-time, and then he's doing Xfinity for a little bit with Colleague, and then now he's like taking the regress steps, right? He was at the top level and then kind of Xfinity, and then now he's back down to truck where he started with Brad Keselowski Racing. And then Loves, right? That's pretty cool to see. It's the same sponsor as his pops, and so the Loves to stay with the Gilliland family. That's some big news. And yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff going on right now. They also, I'm not sure if you heard, they changed the layout for Circuit of the Americas. They're no longer doing the full Grand Prix F1 track there anymore. So they're going to go up the hill and go through the S's a little bit. About halfway through, there's going to be a cut through. And so now instead of taking that full back straightaway, they're just going to take half the back straightaway in. And as a NASCAR fan, and especially as a fellow Texan, that's kind of disappointing, is to see they're not going to be able to use the full course. I felt like seeing them, or where our seats were, because we do go to COTA, I've been there the past 4 years, we were able to see them take 11 and come all the way screaming down the back straightaway, and seeing that braking zone going into turn 12 of the Grand Prix style. You don't get that anymore. And so I think now that limits a lot of passing. And then I was chatting with some of the guys, there's probably 3 passing zones that you could probably outbrake somebody. It's turn 1, maybe 19 and 20 if you set them up right. But now, as you come off that shortcut, I guess you could say that passing zone is going to be hard, because you better be on somebody's back bumper or their quarter panel, show the nose, and if you outbrake them, especially we've seen COTA the first year they were there, when it rained. If it rains, now we're talking about a whole nother animal with the spraying coming out and all that stuff, and with that race being at the end of February, kind of the beginning of March. I think the race is March 2nd, right? So it's going to be different when they head back to COTA for sure. And then just trying to keep up with what's going on. I know there's a certain driver. I know we're still talking about the silly season and whatnot, but there's a certain driver making an appearance this weekend. I don't know if you know this or not, Zach. He's driving a number 8 Budweiser car. And for all our people out there, who's the driver that drove that number 8 Budweiser for the longest time? That'd be Dale Earnhardt Jr. So Dale Earnhardt Jr. making the return in the 8, his font 8, not the Junior Motorsports 8 that we see all the time. It's the DEI 8 with Budweiser slapped all over it. I really wish Teresa would have let him have the 3 and the E on the sides. That would have been really cool to see back on the racetrack. But to see Dale Jr. back in an 8 car with Budweiser as a sponsor, I think that's going to be a really cool thing to see this weekend.
Yeah, Dale Jr. going to Florence, able to race that 250 lapper over there. He said he's very excited to run a longer race with those guys who are able to tear it up on the local circuit. He's got a place in his heart for Florence, so really cool to see that sort of throwback. Of course, Dale Jr., he's teasing all the merch and all the shirts and everything associated with going back to the 8 car. So that's a really neat story. So it's not just the drivers having silly season, but sponsors having silly season, tracks having silly season changes. I mean, there's a lot of change to be found across well, motorsport in general this time of year, so there's always stuff to talk about. I do want to go back. You highlighted all of them, so good on you, Ricky. But I want to talk briefly about Daniel Hemrick, because I think this is a huge move for him, going from part-time Cup to he was racing full-time Xfinity Series, and now he's going back to the number 19 truck, which is, let's face it, there's only a handful of race-winning trucks found in the Craftsman Truck Series, and he landed it. And I think some of that has to do with, and people forget, Daniel Hemrick is a champion in the Xfinity Series. So for him to sort of use that, he's known as a very, let's just say, he's a clean driver in terms of he takes care of his equipment. We'll put it that way. He finishes races. He makes sure that what he takes to the track is what he brings home. I think this is a huge opportunity for him in the Truck Series. Who knows what happens in these series as charter talks happen. We might see a seismic shift in the Cup Series. Maybe Daniel Hemrick takes a step back and goes, all right, I'm just going to try to dominate for a year in the trucks and see what the landscape looks like. I love this move for him, and as a guy who roots for an underdog, I do like the Daniel Hemrick story, right? He bet on himself. He went backwards. He won a championship. He's still in the conversation. Now he lands one of the premier truck rides.
Yeah, and we saw Ickes win a bunch of races last year. They had a great playoff push. Unfortunately, I didn't get to watch. I don't even know who won the Truck Series championship, so I'm going to be honest on that. Don't know. I didn't get to watch it. We were busy with some other thing on Friday night that we normally do. Yeah, so I really don't know, but I do know Ickes had a good season. He won races in that truck. So to see Hemrick go back again, I know I said he's kind of regressed going from Cup, like he started in truck and went up to Xfinity and Cup, and then now he's gone back down the ladder, right? So that's probably, as a driver, that's a gut-wrenching thing to think like, hey man, I have the skill set to be up here, but I'm racing down here, right? So he won an Xfinity championship, like you said, right? So he's in a competitive ride. So at least we know he has the skill set to try to win races in that truck. So we'll see what he can do next year, and maybe possibly he needs a little resurgence, right? Kind of like the Matt DiBenedetto story. Same thing. Everybody thought he was a Cup level driver, driving with the Wood brothers, and then he just been bouncing around left and right from ride to ride because he can't land a full-time gig, right? So, it'll be interesting to see what Hemrick does next season. And I really don't look at Daytona. I don't even remember the 25 schedule. I don't look at Daytona as that's a crapshoot for anybody. Let's be honest.
Now,
when we go to places.
Matter.
Yeah, and now Atlanta, if they go to Atlanta the second race, I don't look at the first 2 weeks of the season. The season for me doesn't start till we go to the first mile and a half, and the first kind of, I know Phoenix isn't an intermediate. It's kind of like it's in between, right? It's a mile long and mixture of short track and kind of the banked a little bit in 3 and 4, right? So for me, the season doesn't start till they go to Vegas and do the West Coast swing. So I want to see what Hemrick can do once we get to those tracks, and then let's see if they're competitive. Another driver I'm looking forward to seeing is Raja Carruth. I thought he did a phenomenal job last year in his rookie season and coming up the ranks and doing what he did, and so hopefully we can see bigger and better things from Raja, and then I want to see a little bit of Daniel and see if he can kind of just make this league kind of on their toes and say, yeah, I'm the guy to beat this season, and if you want to beat me, come get it.
Yeah. It'll be a cool story to follow. What do you guys think down in the chat? Lots of movement in the Cup Series. Priest, Herps, Hemrick, Loves. You got Coda. You got Dale Jr. There's a lot of things moving and shaking right now in the world of motorsports. I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. We've got Ty Majeski here coming from David Mayo.
Yeah.
He's a guy to look out for. Absolutely. All right. Let's
I got one more thing for you. One more thing about NASCAR, not silly season, but just NASCAR in general. They named the most outstanding or the most valuable pit crew. And I want you to guess, Zach, on who that driver and the crew won?
I don't have to guess. I know the answer, and I didn't put it in the rundown in fear that we might be talking about Alex Bowman for the next 20
There
minutes.
you go. There you go. Yeah, it's really cool, man. It's cool to see the 48 guys get something. I know those guys feel really down after what happened at the Roval with them and getting themselves knocked out of the playoffs. But to see them be the most outstanding pit crew, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't see that coming. I
Neither.
thought they were mediocre at best. And so when NASCAR posted that and said that they were the most outstanding pit crew, that's kudos to Blake Harris and what he's done with Alex in the past couple seasons. And so hopefully now they can just let's make weight this time and let's go push for a championship next season.
Yeah, go eat some pasta, Alex. Go make some weight. All right. Screaming out of our pit stall now, looking forward to Nashville Superspeedway. We got a couple things to run down here for you. The reason why this is called Nashville Hot tonight is because tomorrow you're going to see drivers take a racetrack that is going to be greasy and slick. High temperatures forecasted for tomorrow's event at Nashville Superspeedway. There was actually a warning given with the setups as they dropped this weeks to say, hey, well, if you go and practice this on hot temps, because that's what you're going to get come race day. As an admin, Ricky, I know you guys play around with like wind and temperature and humidity and things like that. Talk about that from like a league management point of view as we look forward to Nashville Superspeedway. This is one of those tracks where a driver has to circle and go, okay, the conditions are different here.
Yeah, and so as an admin group, kind of wanted to make it like real life and kind of make it realistic a little bit. So what I did is, so I do all the weather and I get with our group and say, hey, let's do the schedule. So I kind of got a jump start of it last season, probably with 6 or 7 races left. I had some downtime at work. We weren't super busy, and I said, you know what, I'll just work on the schedule right now. So did a little bit of the schedule, posted it to the admins, and then we changed it probably 4 or 5 times. But all the weather situations that you see in our league is based off real life temperatures. Whatever that day of the race was, I pulled it. I went back and looked up every single race, not every single race, but I pulled up every race from last season and what those weather conditions were like, and I matched it. And that's kind of what I went off of. So this one is based off not this season, right? 24. It's based off 23, the 2023 season. And so that day, I remember that day. It was extremely hot. I remember, I believe it was a night race at that time, and I think they started at like 5 o'clock, and temperatures were like in the 90s. And so whatever that weather like was that day, that's what we choose. And so last season, I'll use Texas Motor Speedway as an example. I remember being at that track, and it was over 100 degrees there. So we did the same thing. We came to Old Texas, we slapped it on 100-degree weather, and we kind of just went from there. And when we went to Chicago last year, it was the last race that Chicago had ever hosted. I remember there being like a thunderstorm, and also I remember because Bowman won his first Cup race that day, they had 29-mile-an-hour wind coming out of 3 and 4. So when you went down the front straightaway, we were literally on the rev limiter going into 1. I mean, it was super fun to come off of 4 and just be able to carry speed down into 1. But then when you got to turn 1, you're like, oh God, I hope this thing can slow down and turn. So that's kind of what we did on this season. We went back in the 23 season and kind of did everything what we thought the weather would play out. Only thing we don't have is rain, and thank goodness we don't have rain yet. So I know some people don't have the graphic software and all that stuff to do rain to begin with. So thankful that rain is not an option here for the Cup level. But yeah, that's how we did everything, and that's how we come up with everything. And then now we're going to probably start the process. I think once the playoffs start, we get through round 1, we'll probably start the process of doing season 3. Start working on that schedule, and got some ideas in my head that I want to shoot out to the admin team and kind of figure that out. Want to get it solidified here pretty shortly, because then once our season ends, we have a 6-week break, and then bam, we're right back into another season. And so just want to be able to be prepared and be organized when it comes to all this stuff. Hopefully we get another RC in here to help us call the races. It's kind of hard when admins aren't present every week, right? And I know all of us have things going on outside of this stuff. But it's hard to call races and call accidents when especially you're in the car, and it's hard. Also, what happens when you're involved, right? Now, as an admin, I don't have a say on what's going on. It's somebody else that needs to call that for me, and And so hopefully we can get some things solidified for season 3. And I know we're in the right direction with what we're doing here as far as the league. Other people are starting to come in. I know John's trying to fill spots left and right, so it looks good for the broadcast. So appreciative of him doing that. And so hopefully now it's just word of mouth and people wanting to come over and try what we got going on here on Friday nights.
Yeah, and we're also trying to post this on the iRacing community Facebook group. So we've had a lot of traction. I personally have had a lot of traction with that in the past for acquiring sponsorship and whatnot over there. So maybe we get some new viewers here tonight coming from over there. Maybe you're here right now. Thank you. Please like, comment, subscribe. But let's talk about Nashville Superspeedway here for a little bit. It's a 1.3 mile tri-oval, and it's just outside of Lebanon, Tennessee. But this track has more history found within it, just aside from NASCAR, because, well, to be quite frank, its relationship with NASCAR has been rocky at best for quite some time. This superspeedway has hosted NASCAR series events, but particularly it's made its home for IndyCar events. It's owned by, of course, SMI, which is that ownership group we talk about from time to time, but that's not exactly how this inception began. You see, initial plans for Nashville Superspeedway were drafted in 1997 by the same ownership group that founded Dover Downs, and they quickly found out that their dream of hosting a large NASCAR event, as it was, well, 1997, the height of NASCAR, was going to be harder than what they initially thought. Many tracks were claiming to demand the sport to visit their neck of the woods, to propose races for what was a huge boom in motorsports. Well, the Dover Downs Entertainment Group were able to bring their funds together just outside the Nashville area and say, hey, we want to make sure that this track is a home for both IndyCar and NASCAR series. They started with the Busch series, by the way. We'll get to that in a little bit, because this track had its, well, many delays between when they started construction, when they wanted to build in the early 90s, to later on when they finally opened in 2000. This track faced many obstacles to become where we now fondly look at it today, but one of the major, let's say, hiccups, we'll put it that way, was as soon as the ribbon cutting ceremony ended in trying to build Nashville Superspeedway, a survey was done on the land that was provided to the ownership group in order to build their superspeedway. The problem was that they didn't quite survey the land as much as they thought, and ran into the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. They wound up coming in and declared that this area cannot house a racetrack on it because it is the habitat of the endangered Tennessee coneflower. Yes, a flower stopped Nashville from hosting NASCAR events because, at the end of the day, this debate between this environmental group and the company from Dover Downs carried on for many years over if the juice was worth the squeeze. Eventually, after a long time of debate, they won. The track owners won and were able to break ground on what has become Nashville Superspeedway. The first event at this track happened in April 7th, 2001. It was an open house event, and 5 days later, there was an electrical fire. It burnt many of the suites inside of the superspeedway. It's almost like a bad omen for this racetrack. Struggled to get off the ground, struggling to host NASCAR events, and even within the first few days of opening, there's a fire, and they need to rebuild a section of the suites that first arrived here at this superspeedway. This track eventually changed ownership hands in 2009 when the Dover Motorsports group folded, and eventually the property was given over to SMI. Problem was, In order to maintain the track, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze because there wasn't enough grandstands there to host NASCAR at its top level. And that's why the Busch Series made its home here, and IndyCar eventually made their home here. However, as time went by, many popular drivers in the sport, Chase Elliott, Clint Bowyer, Dale Earnhardt Jr., started to claim that this racetrack was owed something from the NASCAR community. And of course, during the pandemic, the town was able to secure funding in order to make Nashville Superspeedway accommodable for the NASCAR Cup Series. These guys were able to invest heavily in their fan experience and in the pavement itself to create the racetrack in which we know today. It took a long time, but Nashville Superspeedway is now a favorite amongst real-life drivers and sim racing drivers alike today.
Yeah, it did like the Wilkesboro treatment, right?
Yes.
Wilkesboro hosted so many not cup races, but so many NASCAR events in general. And then I remember watching races as a 10-year-old kid and seeing the drivers such as Clint Bowyer and Kevin Harvick win races here. Greg Biffle won races here. I remember watching those races. I remember them being on FX and watching that and seeing that this is a funky little racetrack. I was wondering, like, why is this thing so light gray, and why is this racetrack dark gray and black sometimes at night? And it was a weird, when I first got into the racing aspect, I've always been a part of racing my whole life, but when I didn't get really into it until I was kind of 11, 12, 13 years old. And yeah, I thought this place was kind of weird. And then to see it die, then come back and be risen again, I think you'll like that quote, it risen again. And now it's one of the fan favorites where, like, everybody wants to go to Nashville for some reason. You got Broadway Street after the race. I know Lebanon is, I think it's south, maybe north. I don't know where Lebanon is, to be honest. But after the race, you can hit up Broadway and go do all the Nashville stuff. Hit up the Grand Ole Opry if you wanted to. So not only is it there for racing, but you have so many things to do outside of the racetrack where it's like Nashville's like a mini party town. And I know the guys at Vanderbilt had a big win against Alabama, and they literally walked that goalpost from the football stadium and walked it all the way down Broadway and threw it into the river that was all the way across town. So you can imagine there's so many things to do in Nashville, especially in March. The SEC basketball tournaments down there at Bridgestone Arena. You got the Country Music Hall of Fame down there where this guy is there on display. And yeah, there's so many things to do outside of the races when it comes to Nashville, and you're bound to run into a good time.
Yeah, went there with a group of guys a few years ago, and it was quite a memorable experience. Did most of those things you talked about, so was able to have some fun while we were all down there. But yeah, this track is certainly unique in nature. During the daylight, it looks one way. During the night, it looks another, and especially as the cars lay down the rubber on this racetrack, it changes over time. Ricky, what are your keys to the race trying to tame Nashville Superspeedway on a day where it's going to be very, very hot? The track's going to be super slick.
Right. Yeah. You're probably going to want to have to back up your corners where you think your braking point needs to be. You probably want to back it up just a little bit more because of how hot the racetrack is. You don't want to overheat that right front tire. Again, didn't run any laps yet. Haven't tested anything, and so I guess the first laps we'll do is tomorrow during the session. And kind of been our game plan all season long is just jump in the car and let's turn laps and see what this thing can do, and make some changes here and there. There's only a certain amount of things we can do to the race car where we can change certain things. Your brake bias, how much offset is in the wheel, and when we say offset, if your wheel is cranked to the right a little bit, or if you like it cranked to the left a little bit, that's where that minus and plus ratio comes into mind. And then wherever your pinion, whatever you feel comfortable with controlling the race car on your pinion, that's the response time from when you input and it reacts in the car. Do you use a high number? Do you use a low number? Do you want a quick response? Do you want a kind of a slower response? Those are the things that we'll mess with tomorrow night. But at the end of the day, I believe it's going to be a fuel mileage race. We're at 1.5 miles. I think guys are going to be patient tomorrow. It kind of surprised me last week how patient we were. I think nobody wanted to repeat what happened at the fairgrounds. And so I think they're going to see more patience tomorrow night. And who knows, maybe run into a fuel mileage race. And at the end of this thing, who's going to save fuel? I know there's certain people that try to save every bit of fuel that they have, and there's some drivers that just really don't care what it is, and they try to make it whenever they make it, right? So it's going to be an interesting set of strategies to come down. Who are the guys that are going to try to get stage points? Who are the guys that are in the back that move their stuff forward? And then who are the guys that are at the front that kind of burn their stuff up and move towards the back? So I believe we'll see our normal contestants at the front. ALR, if Kirby can have a good run tomorrow, I know he's been struggling on the mile and a half a little bit. And I know he's been struggling just in every league that he's participated in this season. And so I'd like to see him bounce back just a little bit, you know. And if I'm Kirby, don't side draft, don't lay it on somebody's door 20 laps into the race, right? Let's give them room and let's just be patient and get up there, man. You're 6th in points. I believe you can get into the top 5, right? You just got to play it smart, do the right things necessary to get yourself there at the end, and then hopefully the finish. If Zach can finish 5th, I think Kirby can do the same thing. He can finish 5th. He can be up there with the top dogs and kind of battle it out. And you know, that's when I'm leaning on somebody's door in the last 10, 20 laps, and you know, now I'm making it really difficult so you don't get around. So, yeah, there's going to be a lot of strategies played out tomorrow, I think, for sure. And we'll see how it goes tomorrow night on Snake Bitten Gaming.
Yeah, tire management, fuel mileage, and maybe if we have a green flag run, you got to hit pit road and try not to speed here at Nashville Superspeedway. Yeah. So many obstacles for these drivers to figure out on a hot day in Nashville tomorrow. We're at the point in the show where I make a pick for Nashville Superspeedway. We started out great, Ricky, and now it's just been terrible. So I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but I'm going to continue. We'll keep on trying and see if something sticks. But when it comes to this race, I think you nailed it. I really think the tire management's going to be a big deal here, trying to save your stuff for the long haul. And I also am a big believer of momentum. Like, what you have done in the past now matters as you try to run towards the playoffs and create a good push for a good playoff run. A driver that I've had the ability to talk to in the last few weeks that I think has made a big change in how he races is how I'm going to determine my pick tonight. And I think that well, I've picked one Gonzalez before and I got lucky, so I'm gonna do it again with Mark Gonzalez in the field. He has shown some crazy speed lately. In the past, Mark has run really hard, but I think now he's starting to find the line between aggression and then choosing to be aggressive at the times that matter. And I've watched it up close in the last few weeks with him. I think something's going to click with him, and he's going to wind up getting the win tomorrow at Nashville Superspeedway.
Oh, man, that's unfortunate. That's a terrible pick. Gotta throw some shade out there to Mark if he's watching. Love you, man. And yeah, he's been phenomenal this season. Every time he's in the car, he just seems to drive away, and I just kind of get out of his way and kind of let him do his thing and let him go on, especially with him being a teammate. Don't want to hold up the fast guys way too long, right? But if I can be that buffer to him and he can get a win, yeah, let's go for it. So it keeps it in the family and keeps it within the team. And we said it last night when we did another league, we're not chasing trophies. We're just chasing banners. And I believe if you chase banners, you're going to be able to hoist a trophy. So, yeah, Mark's been solid all year. He has a win at Kentucky in his bag. He's already locked into the playoffs. The only thing with him is he kind of gets into his emotions a little bit when people run him a certain way, and then, you know, his you know what factor goes way out the door, and then you kind of hey man, come back to us. We need you. We know how quick you are, and you know just be patient. You got a quick car, you got a good mindset. Just calm down a little bit and let's refocus on what we got to do. So, yeah, I believe the 88. Will be one of the factors there at the front, and if he can have a good qualifying session. I know a lot of drivers butchered qualifying last week, so if he can have a good qualifying selection, that gives you a good pit selection, and then that could give him momentum going into the race, especially in the first stage.
See, I've ruffled some feathers out here with my pick out here in the chat. Spence, man, I'd pick you, but I don't I never know when you race. So I know Spencer Teal's one of those drivers I can pick any week and nearly any place and have some confidence that he's going to turn out a really good run. But I never know when you race, man. And so I'd rather be right than be a good friend. So I'm picking Mark. So, well, you're all fueled up and ready to go. Thank you so much for joining in tonight on the High Octane podcast. If you want to watch tomorrow night, we're going to be on Snake Bitten Gaming over on Facebook Live. And tune in for an awesome event. If you're a driver watching, I know that there are some of you here. Good luck tomorrow at a really hot and slick racetrack in Nashville. You know all the keys to winning, so just go out and do it. Ricky was able to share them. So for my partner, Ricky, my name is Zach, and until we meet again, thank you for tuning in to High Octane Podcast. Like, comment, and subscribe here on the channel, and you won't miss the next time we go on a road trip together talking about Friday Night Fuel. Talk to y'all again here real soon.